Welcome to our session entitled Help to Stay Stable, featuring Austin Kaplan with Kaplan Law Firm and Amy Price with United Way of Greater Austin. Austin Kaplan is founder and managing attorney of Kaplan Law Firm PLLC, an employment law and civil rights boutique that represents individuals. In 2015, he received a national recognition for successfully suing a Texas county clerk who refused to issue same-sex marriage licenses. In 2016, he was named the Austin Under 40 Austinite of the Year. In 2017, he was chairperson of the City of Austin's Ethics Commission. In 2018, he was president of the Austin Young Lawyers Association. In 2019, he was chairperson of the Austin Bar Association's Pro Bono Committee. Along the years, he has been a super lawyer, rising star, Texas Bar Foundation's fellow, Austin Bar Foundation fellow, and Texas Bar College fellow. In 2020, he became board certified in labor and employment law. As United Way for Greater Austin's Vice President of the Navigation Center, Amy Price leads programs that connect people with essential community resources, including 211, Connect ATX, and healthcare navigation programs. Her previous experience includes being a librarian and special education teacher. She has a bachelor's degree in social work and a master's degree in library science from the University of Texas. Thank you so much to Austin and Amy for helping with this program. And thank you again to our sponsors, Paragon Infusion Centers, Gilead, and Takeda. Your support means so much to us.
Hi, everybody. I'm Amy Price, and I'm the Vice President of the Navigation Center here at United Way for Greater Austin. Our Navigation Center includes several programs that connect people to all types of community resources, including our 211 program that I'm going to be talking about today. 211 is a statewide program. Anybody in Texas can call 211 any time of day. We also here in Central Texas have a healthcare navigation program, a mental health navigation program, and a newer service that I'll briefly mention at the end of my presentation called Connect ATX. If you have ever tried to navigate the social service delivery system or have helped anybody navigate the social service delivery system, you know it is usually not an easy process. Unfortunately, eligibility requirements are complicated. There are lots of structural barriers, whether that's structural racism or transportation barriers, language barriers, and oftentimes wait lists. Because all of those barriers exist, there's a need for 211 to serve as a centralized access point for social service and community resource information. I'll talk a little bit more in a moment about what types of service information we provide to callers, but our staff are professional. Many of them are social workers, have been case managers, and are really knowledgeable about the social service delivery system and provide warm, compassionate customer service as well. Throughout the United States, right now, about 96% of the US population has access to 211. And I believe 211 is rolling out in Chicago soon, so that will mean it will be closer to 97, 98%. 211 is the same service across the country. It's a simple dialing code. You can dial on your phone. Usually you get a person very quickly, usually in less than a minute, who can provide information about all types of community resources. As the world has continued to evolve, 211s have evolved to provide services through online platforms, through text, through chat. What we have learned through COVID-19, we already knew this, but it has been brought to light that so many people do not have the ability for a variety of reasons to jump online and self-navigate. Some do, so we have options for people who prefer to self-navigate, but there are lots of people who prefer to have a warm, professional human being helping them navigate the social service delivery system. And this is just a population, a coverage, 211 coverage map. Here in Texas, we actually have 25 211 call center regions. I'm with the South Central Texas region. With the our 211 call center is in Austin, but we serve a 10-county region. But there are 211 call centers throughout the state. We use the same telephone platform. So right now, for example, COVID-19 has caused our call volume to increase pretty dramatically for a variety of reasons. And so if you were to call like the Houston 211 call center, for example, and maybe they had an influx of calls, in order to prevent hold times, if you are holding for more than 60 seconds, your call will go to the 211 that has capacity to take the call. So because we have the same platform, same training requirements for our staff, and the same centralized database of community information, when you call 211, it doesn't really matter what 211 call center you get. These are pretty common 211 calls. My child has behavior problems. You have information about free family counseling. I'm diabetic and can't afford my insulin anymore. And quite honestly, this need for prescription payment assistance has increased really dramatically over the past several years. I lost my job and don't have enough food in the house to feed my family. Unfortunately, that's a more common need the past few months than before, but it's been one of our top needs for the past several years. About half of our calls are for basic needs assistance. So that's, people who need help, maybe they're about to be evicted and they just need help like with a little piece of their rent in order to stay housed. Maybe they don't have enough food in the house. At this time of year, it's kind of the end of the summer, early fall. We often get calls from people who are behind on their utility payments and maybe are facing a shutoff of their electricity and are calling to get assistance in hopes that they can keep their utilities on. But the other half, the non-basic needs half, range anything from, and I'm going to jump ahead, from legal assistance, transportation assistance, childcare questions, mental health service needs. Really, we have a wide variety of information in our community resource database. Here in Austin, we have 4 full-time staff who keep our community resource database up to date. Across the state, every 211 call center has local data management staff to ensure that our information is accurate, comprehensive, and up to date. We are updating information every single day about all the resources in our database. And I should also mention, 211 in Texas is almost 20 years old. Next year will be our 20th anniversary. And because we have now kind of an intergenerational awareness and 2 decades of relationships, we really do, agencies are really great about going in and updating their information. We do reach out to agencies when they don't update their information, but because of the relationships we've built, organizations are wonderful about making sure they have really accurate, up-to-date information in the 211 database. I'm going to jump back. So in Texas, 211, it's a public-private partnership funded by the Texas Health and Human Service Commission and operated by local community-based organizations. So in our case, we're operated by United Way for Greater Austin. I think about half of the 211s in Texas are operated by United Ways. Some are within their health departments, and some are just within other types of local organizations. The service everywhere is free. It's multilingual. We're really fortunate. Not only are about half of our staff bilingual Spanish speakers, but we also have access to a language line which provides translation into over 230 languages. So we're really able to provide service in any language. The service is confidential. When someone calls, we do collect their gender, age, and zip code and needs that are identified. And I'll talk a little bit more about why we do that and what we do with that data, but we don't collect any personal identifying information like a phone number, a name, an address. That is not collected. I think I mentioned that we're 24/7. Our staff really are professionals. Many of them have served as social workers, case managers. Most of them have college degrees. And before they take even one call, they have at least 100 hours of classroom training, and then they receive ongoing professional development as well. I talked about our database being comprehensive. I think that throughout the state, we have information about 30,000 resources. I should also mention we don't include information about for-profit services. The information we provide is usually about nonprofit, faith-based, or government resources. And then I'll talk about how we kind of track community needs and trends and share that data in just a moment. We do, through 2-in-1, have an online platform at 2in1texas.org. You can search by category and zip code. And also we now have a chat tool, so you can chat with a navigator during regular business hours. I think that's between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. And so there are staff that are staffing that chat tool throughout the day. I will say, so I'll mention this very quickly, I get asked for print directories all the time. I get asked, people say, can you print out your entire database and give me a booklet? And we really, as much as we know people love print resources and how useful they can be, because agency information changes so quickly, they really are a disservice because they're usually out of date and oftentimes cause more harm than help. So we've gotten away from print resources. This is just a screenshot of our online platform at 2in1texas.org. And I should mention this is that is managed by the Texas Health and Human Service Commission. And then locally here in Central Texas, and there is 2-in-1 data throughout the state, but I'm going to speak on like our data, like what we've done with our data, just kind of as an example. I mentioned we collect a caller's zip code, age, gender, and the needs that are identified during the call and the services we connect them to. And if there is not a service and there is an unmet need, we share that data with funders, researchers, and planners. Right now, we provide exports on a monthly basis to several foundations. We're located here in Austin, so we work very closely with several research centers at the University of Texas, Dell Medical's, or UT Dell Medical School's research team. And then there are lots of planning entities that use our data too to plan on how to disperse funding for social services. This is just, again, a lot of this is kind of our local information, but I think some of this is applicable to the entire state of Texas. Housing is really, I mean, this was true last year, and I know it's even more true now. It really, calls related to housing make up about 1/3 of our call volume. And that can be anything from, I can't pay my utility bill, I need help paying my rent, I just got evicted, I'm having a dispute with my landlord, I need emergency shelter, I am interested in learning about weatherization programs, but that's really our top need. Other trends, and one trend we've seen throughout the state in metropolitan areas, as inner cities have become less affordable to live in, there's been kind of a movement outward by people with median and below incomes. And so many of our callers are calling from outlying areas. Our services we're referring to are often still located pretty centrally. And so we've had to get really, really creative in how we can connect people to the resources. If they can't get there, we're no good. So we've dipped our toe in a few transportation projects. We have a partnership with Lyft, the ride sharing company, to sometimes, in some cases, and we put this on hold due to COVID, but we at times have been able to provide rides for our callers to get to the services they need. And then we have a couple of other local partnerships around transportation as well. And then I'm going to talk very briefly about our response to COVID-19. At times, our call volume has been 10 times the normal amount. Right now, it's about twice the normal volume. Many people are calling 2-in-1 for the first time. Last year, and I think just about every previous year I can think of, about 10% of our callers are calling for the first time. And from March to July, 30% of our callers were calling for the first time. And part of that is because the state was really utilizing 2-in-1 as a point of contact. We were mentioned on a lot of the state highway signs that are operated by TxDOT, and there was just a new awareness about 2-in-1. So people the past few months have called us for information about COVID-19 testing, unemployment insurance, all types of COVID resources associated with COVID-19, new rent assistance programs, new food distribution sites. We've actually added capacity to our community information team to make sure we're able to keep track of both, like all of the news resources related to COVID-19 and existing services that have had to change the way they provide service. 211 in Texas also serves as a point of contact during disasters. And hurricanes have been where we have really been utilized statewide. Actually, we still are taking calls related to Hurricane Laura, which happened, I guess it was about 6 weeks ago. And Hurricane Harvey was really the last big hurricane we responded to. But anytime a disaster, a hurricane or tropical storm is approaching the Texas coast, we ramp up very quickly. We bring on contract staff. We have a bank of volunteers we call upon to help us take increased call volume related to the disaster. And then again, like our latest kind of disaster response has been around COVID-19. Here in Austin, we have a complimentary service called Connect ATX, which is relatively new. It's funded by the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, and it really is a complement to 211. I know this isn't this service really right now only serves Travis County, but there is an online platform and helpline, a chat tool, we can text information, and it provides something called closed loop referral, where we can actually send the referral to an agency and see if the person was able to get help or not, and follow up if needed. Again, like that's because of that service, it's not a confidential, like the confidentiality of 211 is not included with Connect ATX. I'm trying to think if there's anything. Another difference between 211 and Connect ATX is that there's a proactive assessment through Connect ATX. So if someone's calling for food, we're also going to ask them if they need help with things like job training, higher education, mental health, transportation. So it's a more holistic assessment, and we do more follow up with the caller. It's a lot more of a longitudinal relationship. That's it. Again, I'm Amy Price, Director of the Navigation Center at United Way, which includes our 211 program. You can contact me. Here's my email address. With any questions you have, and I'll either try to answer them or get you to the right person.
All right. Howdy. Hi, everybody. My name is Austin Kaplan. I'm a labor and employment lawyer here in Austin, Texas. Thrilled to be here. I want to first take a moment to thank Alicia and also thank Dr. Harry Thomas for putting this event together and putting this forum together. I think it's a very important issue, and so hopefully I have some helpful things from the employment law and employment protection side for folks that are dealing with or have family members or friends dealing with IBD, Crohn's and colitis, or any related issues. For example, IBS, anything within that general space. I think that these are critically important issues, and the employment protections are robust, but they are also really specific in how they work. So hopefully I can help kind of explain some of how this works and provide some helpful information. I will say at our firm, we generally represent individuals. We do a fair amount of disability cases, including workplace accommodations. And we actually have litigated in federal court a case involving Crohn's colitis. So we're right with it, and we feel pretty strongly about it. So of course I've brought a slide deck, which will make it a little bit easier. Hopefully to go through this. Here are 7 things that I think you need to know right now about employment law specific to Crohn's and colitis. Let's see if I can move through the slides. Aha, okay. Here's what I think we ought to talk about, and then maybe we'll do some Q&A at the end. So the top 7 things that kind of came to mind for me were the ADA, the FMLA, COVID-19, practical steps to take if you are facing an issue in the workplace or you have family and friends who are. And then my favorite thing to do, the number 7 mystery box, to keep everybody tuned in until the end. Something critically important a very critical issue that I won't tell you until the end to try to keep everyone's eyes on the screen. Or in the before times, this would be to keep everyone awake after lunch during the presentation, but I'll assume everyone, not everyone's eaten just before this, or, this could be first thing in the morning thing. Anyway, top 7 things. Number 1, ADA accommodations for me. What are my rights? Number 2, ADA accommodations for a family member that I'm caring for. What are my rights at work with respect to, let's say caring for a parent or a child with these conditions? What about FMLA? Number 3, what are my rights? Number 4, what about FMLA rights if I'm caring for a family member? Number 5, does COVID-19 change this? And if so, how? Number 6, what are some practical steps that I can take if I'm running into trouble? What do I do? And then number 7, mystery box. So let's go right to it. ADA accommodations for me. What are my rights? Let's talk a little bit about ADA and Crohn's, and I'm using that as an umbrella term for all related conditions. First things first, what do I mean when I say ADA? I mean the Americans with Disabilities Act as amended in 2008. This is a federal law, and it protects almost all employees in the United States. It protects employees who are at workplaces with 15 or more employees for 20 or more calendar weeks in this year or last year. So the rule of thumb might be if you have more than 15 employees at your employer generally, you are covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act law. And by the way, the Texas state law that covers the same thing. So who is disabled under the ADA? And that's a critical question. Before 2008, when the law was amended, it was actually a pretty high bar. Following 2008, the bar was substantially relaxed, such that the legislature, the Congress, told the courts, the inquiry isn't really so much whether or not someone has a qualifying disability as it is whether or not they're being discriminated against because of the conditions that they're facing. So the legal standard is a physical or mental condition that substantially limits one or more major life activities or bodily functions. And so as you might imagine, IBD, IBS, Crohn's, those will substantially affect the digestive tract. They may substantially affect major life activities as well. There are a couple of different ways that those conditions will qualify as a disability under the law. Not in absolutely every circumstance. And I took a look at the cases on this just to check myself before this discussion, and I found that as a general rule, in most circumstances, this will be a qualifying disability, or it's at least a fact question for a jury to decide whether or not it is or isn't a qualifying disability. I don't know if it's possible. I'll defer to the Dr. Thomas on this, but I don't know if it's possible to have such a mild case that it wouldn't substantially affect a bodily system. That might be a close call case. But I think as a lawyer, for the most part, people that have diagnosed conditions here are going to qualify as disabled under the law. And so once you have a disability, then the question becomes, am I entitled to accommodations in the workplace? And the answer is yes, under the law. The law says if you have a disability, you are entitled to reasonable accommodations. And once you request a reasonable accommodation, the employer must engage in what the law calls the interactive process, which is essentially an open dialogue or a back and forth to talk about how best to accommodate whatever limitations you have that are caused by your condition. So what is a reasonable accommodation versus an unreasonable accommodation? Because courts will say, well, there's a broad range of reasonable accommodations, but you can't demand an accommodation that would be an undue burden on the company. So it just has to be reasonable. But of course, who decides what that is and what does that mean? Well, I took a look at a recent case here in Texas, and the court said that a restriction on travel because of Crohn's disease diagnosis was reasonable. A accommodation that allowed the employee to take time off to go for medical appointments was reasonable. A request for a flexible schedule was also reasonable. The employee then came back though, and because of some complications requested an unlimited leave of absence, and the court found that that was not reasonable. And I will say that, courts struggle with accommodation requests that request for an unlimited or very vague but long period leaves of absence. So the practice pointer here is if you go to your doctor and there really is some lack of clarity as you're getting treatment or family members getting treatment, try your best to just kind of put up some goalposts for check-ins. The restrictions, they're fully restricted from working or partially restricted from working for the next month until the next check-in with the physician, in which case we will reevaluate the progress and the condition based on the treatment. Instead of just, absolutely restricted from now until I say so, and who knows when this will ever, when the restriction will ever be lifted. I think those kinds of situations are troubling for courts. The case I had in mind here was Feist versus Louisiana Department of Justice. So I apologize, not in Texas, but in the Fifth Circuit, which covers Texas. So there have been a number of cases in this space to think about. What about accommodations under the Americans with Disabilities Act for a family member who's been diagnosed with Crohn's disease? Unfortunately, the answer is that the Americans with Disabilities Act does not provide for caregiver accommodations. So caregivers of individuals with disabilities, so not you, but a child, let's say, you're not entitled to reasonable accommodation under the ADA. But you are entitled to protection from discrimination based on your association with that individual with a disability. So it's a little bit strange, right? You can't necessarily get protection for requesting time off to take your child to medical appointments under this law, but you are protected from being treated differently because the employer is aware that, let's say, your child has this condition and the condition is a disability. So as a practical matter, employers will regularly grant those accommodations, even though the law doesn't explicitly require it. Complicated little space, and so this is where lawyers tend to live, right? In these complicated twists and turns. Let's talk about the FMLA. Everyone is likely familiar with this law, 1993 law, the Family Medical Leave Act. Essentially, once you are in a covered position, you have as much as 12 weeks of protected leave that you can take to treat or deal with a serious health condition. So what about FMLA leave for me? Here are the hurdles that you have to meet before you can get it. You have to work for an employer with 50 or more employees in 20 or more work weeks in a current or preceding calendar year. So, and it's 50 or more employees within 75 miles of your work site too. So there's some head counting to do, and it kind of, as a rule of thumb, only exists in larger employers or employment situations. That's just the way Congress wrote the law. You must have worked for at least a year, let's say, 12 months straight at this employer in order to have your FMLA protection kick in. And you have to have worked 1,250 hours in that period. So for extreme part-timers, you may not qualify. Oh, there it is at the bottom, sorry, 50 employees within 75 miles. So sometimes you're doing a Google Maps radius drawing to try to see if we can count enough heads to get the FMLA protection. Usually your employer will tell you, right, whether or not you're FMLA qualified. So if you're unsure, one place to look is the handbook and see what they say. Or talk to HR and see what they say. FMLA leave itself, you have options in how you take it. You can take 12 weeks off just straight, right? Just take your 3 months of leave. Or you can take it intermittently. So you can take half days or a couple of hours a week, or even if you need to go to doctor's appointments or on demand, you can take FMLA leave, that's tough, leave that way as well. So again, you want to work with HR and your medical provider to figure out a way to set up a system that works best for you. FMLA leave is only available to treat a serious health condition. So what's that? It's a little bit different than the ADA definition of disability. It is an illness, injury, impairment, or physical or mental condition that involves inpatient care in hospital, hospice, residential medical care facility, or continuing treatment by a healthcare provider. So presumably there are some conditions that would qualify for FMLA leave, but not ADA leave, and perhaps vice versa. So you really kind of have to do two separate analyses to see if you're covered. But once you are covered and you make your request for leave, the employer is prohibited from retaliating against you for it, and they are prohibited from failing to return you to your position. So let's say you needed to take 2 weeks of leave and then return to work. There is a requirement that the employer not interfere with your leave and return you back to the same position that you were in with all the benefits you had, including if it's a long enough time or something occurs in the interim, whatever raise or other benefit you may have had. So it's a very helpful law. And I mentioned at the outset that we filed a case on these issues. And so this is just some information from the actual live pleading in the case, dealing with an employee who took a leave of absence and then, was not, we allege, was not fully reinstated. Let's talk a little bit about FMLA leave for family members. A little bit different than the ADA. FMLA does allow for caregiver leave, but it specifies who the caregivers are in specific ways that may not fit what's going on in your world. So it's the spouse, son, daughter, or parent. And then the other thing to watch out for here is if you are taking leave to assist a spouse, son, daughter, or parent, I've gotten ahead of myself, you want to make sure that you are actually doing things that are necessary. So they have to be unable to take themselves to doctor's appointments or care for themselves, etc. There are some cases out there where, it's questionable whether the person needed to take the leave to care for the other person. The other person could care for themselves. And so just watch out for that. That's an often litigated space. And don't forget, for FMLA leave, you want to count the number of employees and make sure you get to that number 50. That's an area of concern. I'll say from the lawyer's desk, if the employer tells you you have FMLA leave and you rely on that, and we find out later on that actually they just didn't have enough people, oops, we had 49, not 50, the courts have created kind of an exception that says that you can still get FMLA by estoppel. So you relied on their representation. So the rule of thumb might be just check with HR and see if they say you are FMLA covered, and then you can take your leave. COVID-19, I want to briefly touch on. How does that affect us in this world? How does that affect people with IBD at work? And the answer is, oh boy, it's complicated analysis. This chart is available for you on mytila.org, prepared by us Texas employment lawyers. There was a change to the FMLA that's effective this year that has to do with COVID. It's extremely complicated. There are some paid leave options. There is additional FMLA coverage. If you're in this space, I would just encourage you to take a look at the chart and see if you might qualify for these changes to the law. What about some practical steps to take? So Crohn's disease, IBD, I'm getting the runaround at work and I need some accommodation, or I feel like they're treating me poorly because of this, or any number of ways this can come up with respect to your career and your work. I would kind of lay it out like this. Here are your practical steps. I would raise it first internally. You may go to a friendly supervisor to start, right? And say, hey, I'm having trouble here. I'm not getting the support I need or the accommodations I need. If that doesn't work, you may go to HR and say, hey, HR, my supervisor or whoever it is, the boss's boss is not understanding and not granting the accommodations that I need to deal with my condition, not giving me the leave I need, etc. And say, I'm being treated differently, perhaps because of my condition, etc. If that doesn't happen, or if HR is part of the problem, which can occur, and you've sort of exhausted your internal remedies, I would recommend going to either seeking out legal help at that point in time or going to an external agency yourself. So these three agencies listed here, EEOC, TWC, and City of Austin, all do the same thing. I wonder if I can mouse over. Oh, I can. So EEOC, oops, that was bound to happen, wasn't it? EEOC, TWC, and City of Austin all do the same thing. You can make a report with any of those. City of Austin, of course, only if you're in the City of Austin. And they will launch an investigation, and it's the first step towards making a complaint. My suggestion is work things out internally if it's at all possible before doing that, because it does ratchet up the threat level about the kind of dispute between you and the employer. And then, of course, external legal organizations. So private firms like mine handle disability cases, including failures to accommodate all the time. Disability Rights Texas has a smaller but very specific docket on these issues, and they also have some helpful resources and great folks over there for you too who can help. And of course, the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation has some great resources too, nationally and locally. So reach out for help if you're running into these issues for sure. Let's see. Yeah, you may wonder, here's a question that comes up a lot. If I file with the, I've exhausted all the routes internally, they're not listening to me, I'm not getting what I need. If I file with the EEOC, will future employers find out about it? And the answer is generally no. As a general matter, those are kept confidential, they're not published. The EEOC doesn't put them out on a public website, and there really is no way for future employers to find out about what happened with your current employer. So, so it's a step that you can take short of filing a lawsuit that kind of will assert your rights and not necessarily cause potential unwanted consequences for your career down the line. But private lawyers, same thing. Once people reach out to us, we have to keep everything 100% confidential. Medical issues 100% confidential, unless and until we have authorization and the right to go file a suit, and then we may publicize some or all of it. But it's a great way to kind of talk to somebody who knows the ins and outs, all this detailed stuff about what your rights are. And we regularly, my firm at least, regularly consult with individuals who are current employees, kind of on a 1 hour meeting, like a Zoom meeting, to just talk about their rights, make a plan of action, et cetera, and kind of give people a DIY playbook for how to secure their career, get comfortable, get their accommodations, and move forward. So that's been a neat little piece of practice we've been able to roll into what we do. Not everything needs to be a federal lawsuit, right? And so it's something we can do for folks privately, which has been helpful, especially in the disability accommodation arena. Okay, the mystery box, which I foreshadowed moments ago. Here's number 7. I think the big issue moving forward is going to be work from home, especially for individuals who are dealing with these conditions. It has been the #1 request in general for individuals who come to our firm with failure to accommodate issues for so many conditions, for all conditions. The #1 thing people wanted for years was the right to work from home, and employers incredibly fought it. And I just couldn't understand it then, and I certainly can't understand it now. So last year, recently, the Fifth Circuit, which is the federal appellate court that covers Texas, issued the opinion in Credur, which was a terrible case that involved a lawyer who was working from home successfully following a kidney condition and recovery, asked to continue working from home as she continued to recover. The Attorney General's office, I believe it was, said, we're not going to accommodate you anymore. You got to come in. And she said, that's ridiculous. There's a number of reasons why I can't come in. And there's a number of reasons why it's no problem for me to continue working from home and doing great work. Anyway, she lost. It went up to the appellate court, and the appellate court said that's not a reasonable accommodation for a lawyer to be able to work from home. But lo and behold, in 2020, everyone in that department started working from home. And everyone in the Texas Attorney General's office started working from home. And my entire law firm is working from home. We're all working from home because I believe the trend is going to be presumptive reasonableness for work from home positions for office and desk jobs moving forward, anything involving a computer and internet. So obviously not food service and cement factory and jobs where you really do have to be there. But any job that predominantly involves kind of a computer and laptop and internet, I think we now have a much stronger argument to judges across the country that an accommodation that allows work from home is just is presumptively reasonable and it allows the job to get done. But it's always an individualized inquiry, so we're always going to be kind of working through the looking at the job duties and looking at whether or not they can be accomplished from home, et cetera. But I'm a lot more optimistic about this than I was in the past, because I think our national experiment has been largely successful in this space, and I think that that's going to open up a world of opportunities where there weren't, because we know, because we get these calls confidentially, that there are so many individuals who didn't take jobs or didn't apply for jobs that they otherwise could have done and would have been great jobs or dream jobs or great careers, because they just felt like, hey, I need these accommodations. I need, breaks. I need special restroom, accommodations. And it's too much. I'm just not going to do it. And so now it's like, hey, if work from home is a way to get this job done, then that's something that can work for everybody and allows just much more flexibility for employees dealing with, with conditions that I just think that we're going to be living in a much more accessible world in some ways with this, just automatically. I hope I'm right. We'll see. There hasn't really been a ton of tests yet in the courts, because this is all, of course, happening now and so new, and the court system is so slow. So that is the 7 things. Those are the 7 things you need to know right now about employment law with respect to IBD, Crohn's and colitis, etc. Certainly here for Central Texas. We are here for individuals to help. Disability Rights Texas is here to help. Reach out if you or friends are having issues. You're not alone. People are there to help, and we hope everyone is doing well under challenging circumstances here in 2012.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Austin. And hopefully we still have Amy here and she can come join us. You actually, you anticipated my question. So my very first question on my list for you is, how will more telework change things like the ADA? So it sounds like not quite yet.
Courts are just so slow. So, when we file an ADA lawsuit, we won't get summary judgment, orders from the court for usually about 2 years, and trial in that range too. So, and that's true across the board. So I think it's going to take a while for the opinions to start to come out and we see the court system reacting to our new normal. But we're all very optimistic about the scenario.
Yeah, well, it certainly makes having that discussion with your supervisor and your HR department a lot easier, I would imagine, if you've already successfully worked from home for how many months now? It's been 7 months. So I think, yes, I'm with you. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that this becomes a more appealing option to employers, because I think it does work for a lot of people to have that flexibility.
For the folks that have reached out to us that have been through that exact situation, I've been working from home for 6 months. Employer now says I need to come in. I have a disability. I need an accommodation. Can you help? This is, of course, our first argument. Or, if we get involved, where we may reach out to the employer and say, or the HR department and say, hi, can we talk about this? Because this person's working from home right now and everything's great, and they need an accommodation because they have a disability. So what's the problem? And so it kind of does put the onus back on the employer much more than in the past, where everybody's presumptively working in the office. Mm-hmm.
I'm also curious, so, the general trend is also that it is becoming much more often where employers have sort of a home base somewhere, but then their employees are sort of scattered all over and are work from home. Like my sister-in-law just got a job here recently where every single one of their employees works from home. And so how does that change something like FMLA, where, it really does say it has to be 50 people within 75 miles? Well, in my sister-in-law's case, there are more than 50 people at this company, but they're not within 75 miles of her. So does FMLA not apply?
That is an outstanding question. The way it should work, sort of, is that the FMLA will look to whatever the headquarters is where people are reporting to.
Got it.
And so we've run into this problem over the years with tech employers who have been kind of more flexible and have had people sort of stationed in Austin at their houses, but maybe the employer's in Dallas or San Francisco, what have you. And so the regulations kind of point to wherever the Boston headquarters is, and then you kind of count heads from there. But I think because, again, they were written in 1993, the regulations sort of envision, right? They envision like almost like an oil field services company with a boss or headquarters in San Antonio, and then folks out driving trucks out into the field. So it's not a great fit necessarily, but that's what we have argued. I think we're going to see more jurisprudence on that coming soon too. As we end up with a sort of dispersed workforce, like what does that mean? I do hope that maybe someday Congress will revisit the FMLA and lower that number so that more employees will have that coverage. Because I do think that it's really helpful, for people at small employers to just have job protection. FMLA, interestingly, doesn't require employers to pay. No. So there's no guaranteed paid leave except for Coronavirus Response Recovery Act, which is it's a short time only, right? It's sort of expiring at the end of the year, but there's no required paid leave, paid medical leave in this country. And so hopefully, it'd be nice to get that too, but small victory here would be to get just some more protection for more people.
Yeah, no, well, the paid leave for all is a bridge we shall cross on another day, shall we say. Amy, I'm gonna come back to you for a second. So I am curious, what we're looking at right now is a lot of people, just because of, again, coronavirus and what's happening with our economy, some folks losing their insurance because they've lost their jobs. So I'm curious about sort of, is that a question you've gotten a lot of at 311, and sort of what might people do if they're in that situation?
Yes, we have gotten calls and really the ones that I've heard about have been people losing their health benefits due to loss of employment. But we do have information both about how to apply for public benefits. Most counties also have kind of health, they don't call it health insurance, but it's a health coverage program for people with medium or lower incomes. We also, 211 also serves as a point of contact for Affordable Care Act open enrollment, which will start in a couple of months. And we can oftentimes make appointments for people with local organizations that can help with applications. We can sometimes even start to walk people through the application process. So absolutely, we are a point of contact for people who have questions about health benefits.
Great. Well, and actually that kind of goes to one of my other questions I had for you is, if somebody is looking to get some assistance doing some of these applications, because, Austin, you mentioned Social Security. That Social Security disability application is lengthy. And so is that something, so 311 operators obviously don't have time to sit with somebody and do the application, but they're able to sort of direct people to other types of charities that assist with this or groups that assist with it?
Yes, that is right. I will say that because of COVID-19, so many services are now being offered virtually. There actually is a need. There are more people, and the application process that often was in person is virtual. And so there is this increased need for people to get help with these online applications that are oftentimes people don't have access to for a variety of reasons or have other barriers to completing them. So just to say, like, just kind of a side note, like I know that there are foundations. Our United Way here in Austin is looking to organizations to provide this type of assistance. So it is a need. We have some resources, but it also is a growing need, but we're working on filling that gap. I also mention, so 211 actually has two options. Option one is the option you select to talk to your local 211 call center to get information about community resources that I talked about. But there's also an option two that you can call and actually apply for state benefits. And that includes like Medicaid, it includes TANF, it includes SNAP or food stamps. So you can actually call and apply for those public benefits through 211. So I just wanted to mention that as well. We don't take those calls. They're actually taken by a for-profit call center that the state contracts with, but the dialing code access point is the same.
That's so great. And just to make sure if people don't know, TANF is temporary assistance for needy families. So if you are in a situation where you've lost your job, there might be some help for you with TANF and food stamps and things like that. So definitely it's worth the phone call because they can certainly tell you you're not allowed to have it. And it can happen pretty fast. So yeah, I would definitely encourage people, if you're in a situation where you're struggling financially, call 211, go through that process. If they say no, call 211 back, and then use option one to hopefully get to you guys to see if there are other community programs available to you as well. So that's great. All right, Austin, back to you. I feel like do you feel like you're in job interviews now? Let me think. The only other question I had for you is, you mentioned that one place where you could take a complaint if you felt like your employer was discriminating against you is the city of Austin. Is that, tell me the restrictions on that, because that's the first time I've heard you can take something to the city. Is that just companies that are local companies? What if you're working for, say, HP, and it's a bigger company that's sort of nationwide? Could you still take it to the city of Austin? Like, I'm mystified by this. Please clarify.
Yeah, it's sort of lesser known, but the city of Austin has a City of Austin Equal Employment and Fair Housing division, and they have a work sharing agreement with the EEOC and the Texas Workforce Commission. EEOC is Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, federal. TWC is Texas Workforce Commission Civil Rights Division, that's the state entity. And then the city also has its own kind of civil rights division entity. And all three of them do the same thing. They all can intake civil rights complaints about violations of civil rights statutes. ADA is a civil rights statute, and so they can all hear it. And let me see if I can share my screen so you can see what I'm talking about here. And yeah, it's definitely the least utilized of the bunch, but my understanding is they will take any complaints by any worker within the city of Austin. Now, it may ultimately end up in the same place. All these organizations can direct complaint investigations to each other. And so the city of Austin may just send it to the EEOC or the Texas Workforce Commission for you. Sometimes the city of Austin will actually investigate itself. And it may just simply be easier for somebody to roll down to this office here on, I guess, East 11th Street and just make the complaint in person there, rather than dealing with the EEOC, whose field office is in San Antonio, or the Texas Workforce Commission. But it's just, it's kind of all sort of the same thing. So yeah, it's an interesting sort of thing. And we have the Mayor's Commission on Disability. I maybe got that title wrong, but that's another place that, if someone's really having trouble in the workplace, or a group of people, let's say, is having trouble in the workplace, and they're just not being heard, and it's in Austin, that may be another place to take kind of issues potentially, right? If it's something that we may want to talk about, just as something that affects the city, right? So one of the things that we hear about a lot is, hey, this pandemic's going on. The employer has required everyone to return to work. They haven't implemented safety in a way that I think is appropriate or follows the CDC guidelines or what have you. And I'm hitting a brick wall. What are my options? And we've been dealing with that a lot. And so there's a lot of sort of novel ways to do it that really don't involve like filing a lawsuit necessarily. It's more like, raising awareness and sort of raising public awareness, and even maybe just making the employer aware of what the requirements are or what they should do, and sort of advocating for a more safe environment. And there's a lot of that going on, a lot of education of small employers in particular going on out there. It's tough. I mean, everyone's in a tough spot. The employers are in a tough spot too. This is new to them, and everyone's kind of hopefully doing their best. So we try to help employees to just make sure that their situations are safe, and for individuals that need accommodations, and can't return to work, explaining or helping explain why that's the case, and trying to make sure that the employers understand and grant the accommodations.
Yeah, I think that is a great service for sure. Are there other cities that have something similar to that? Like, so if you're listening and you're in San Antonio, does San Antonio also have, could you go to the city of San Antonio instead of the city of Austin?
Okay, this is a great job interview question. Fort Worth has one, Austin has one, and I believe Corpus Christi. So it's like just the most random collection of Texas cities, right?
It really is, yeah.
But I'm pretty sure that's right. I'm going to double check that while we're talking.
That's okay. If all else fails, you've always got the EEOC or Texas Workforce Commission to go to. So I think that, you got something to fall back on if it's not San Antonio. That's
Yes.
really funny.
That is
Well,
it.
you're hired. How about that? Does that make you feel
Thank
better
you.
about
Thank
this?
you. I double checked, and that's it. City of Austin Equal Employment and Fair Housing Office, City of Corpus Christi Human Relations Division, and City of Fort Worth Human Relations Commission. So
Okay.
there you go. Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, El Paso, where you at? What's going on here? But I know, just
Yeah.
us.
Well, I would imagine a lot of those cities do have like an Office of Disability Services or something like
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Because I know most major cities do. So certainly checking with them, they would be able to help as well. So that was another
Yes.
great reference. So lots of places to go. And as you mentioned, the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation has a helpline. The IBD Help Center is staffed by master's level ladies, just like 211 that are trained. 211 does a lot more services than we do. So certainly 211 is a good place to go if you're sort of in need with general help. But if you need information on IBD and if you need information on workplace accommodations and things like that, we are a great resource for that. So thank you for your shout out for that. Amy and Austin, thank you guys so very much. Look at it's the A team today. I really appreciate you guys doing this. I really appreciate your help with these resources. You guys both put your contact information on there in case people have questions. Thank you for that. You guys are also very welcome to email me. I will make sure you have my contact information as well, and I can get the questions out to Austin or Amy. If you are further afield than in Central Texas, you're welcome to email me, and I can also get your information to hopefully somebody who can help you, either one of my colleagues, our IBD Help Center, or maybe Austin and Amy can still help. We'll find out. So again, thank you guys so very much. We really appreciate this, especially this very timely presentation. So thanks guys. Have a very good night.
Thanks.
Thank
Such a
you.
pleasure, you guys. Bye, Alicia. Thank you.